Harvard Business Review found a magic number. They found that 87% of companies that were struggling with their revenue growth were caused by internal reasons, not external reasons. So not the marketplace, not the economy, not whoever's the current president in America or the Prime Minister in the UK, internal factors. Now, I asked myself, I wonder if those factors are relevant to smaller, fast-growing businesses. And I went back over pretty much 30 years of my business career, and I asked myself, what do I think, what have I experienced as the 5 key factors for revenue being stalled? And this is what I came up with. Tell me whether you think these apply to you. So number 1 is the founder bottleneck. Now, this is a very obvious one that many consultants and coaches and books refer to. But let me tell you my experience. When I was running a fast-growing tech company, I'd set this company up in the UK and EMEA. It was a subsidiary of a US company. And I'd put in place my own revenue system that I was really happy with, and it was working. I had leaders in place. I had everyone working in the way that I wanted them to work. But I still struggled to take holiday. It got to the point that the leaders in my business were pushing me to go on holiday because they could see that I had a very young family, and they could see that I needed time with my family, especially my young kids. And eventually I did go, but the pull, the momentum against going was so strong, because I guess I was playing the role of the classic bottleneck in that business. Now, you tell me whether or not that's relevant to you. And of course, there's all sorts of books that are written about that. But that's factor number 1. Factor number 2 is disengaged people. Now, there's so much research that backs this up, especially from the Gallup Workplace Survey, which states that only 20% of employees are engaged at work, 64% are disengaged, and only 16% are fully or actively engaged in what they do. Now, the story that, for me, the experience I had that really bore this out the first time for me was I was working in a small tech company, and the leader was very eloquent and he loved to speak. So we would all be sat around the table, and he would stand up and he would start to begin with, lecture from the front of the room. And as he was getting lost in his thoughts, he would walk around the room, and every now and again he would ask if that was clear. But he wasn't engaging people in his thoughts. He was just speaking, broadcasting. And as a result, people in that organization were very loath to actually speak up, and hardly anyone would actually challenge him unless they were very confident. So that was an experience that I had that I found quite shocking, because that was after I came from the big business world where that just didn't happen. So that was one. And tell me whether or not in your guts do you feel that your people are highly engaged in what they're doing. If you've got a very small business, they probably are, because people who are disengaged really stand out the smaller the size of your organization. But I guess it all depends. Now, factor number 3, I call no diagnosis. Whoops, can I spell that right? Diagnosis. Apologies about that spelling. I didn't really spend enough time in school. So no diagnosis. Now, tell me if this figures with you. I found myself in the boardroom of a Fortune 100 company, and it was one of the subsids of the overall Fortune 100. But I was with an executive team. It was a business that was turning over more than $1 billion, and they had a revenue growth problem. So I was at front with a flip chart, and I was asking all the senior execs what they thought the reasons were for the lack of growth. And I didn't just ask them to call out, I asked them to write down the reasons that they thought this business was struggling to continue in the growth cycle. And then I asked them to pass around their answers and for someone else to read out those answers. And the room was horrified, especially the chief exec, were horrified to find that hardly anyone had the same answers. There were similarities between departments, but no one had the same diagnosis as to what the problem was. And I think that's a problem. And I think it actually links and hooks up with the previous one, because I'm a real believer that one of the reasons why we have so many disengaged people in our workplaces is because we don't share with them the problems that we have, the problems that we're having to achieve our goals. And this is one of the most, I think, engaging ways to get your people on side and to bring people together, to align people around what the problem is. But there has to be a leader who is willing to hold the space and hold back their opinions so that we can include more people in diagnosing what the problem is. Now, this no diagnosis is also very, for me, described really well in this book by Professor Richard Rummelt, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. He's very opposed to strategy that is driven by vision, purpose, and goals. Now, it's a little bit Marmite. Not everyone agrees with his views, but I've seen so often a lack of agreement as to what the problem is because there's no diagnosis, and that's at the center of his book. The kernel he talks about is diagnosis. First of all, you have to have a diagnosis as to what's going on in the business. Then you can apply new thinking, and then you can execute in a coordinated fashion. But first of all comes diagnosis. Number 4, again, very close to my heart. I call this no compounding. Again, apologies about the writing. Now, my early business training, prior to joining British Airways, I was a restaurant entrepreneur, but I realized I wasn't very good at building the business. So I knew I needed to learn business skills. So I went off to British Airways and I learned about running an operation. And at the heart of running an airline operation is the concept of, well, back then there was, I'm not sure if it still is, it probably isn't, if you're a British Airways flyer, is the concept of Kaizen, which came out of the Japanese manufacturing. But what Kaizen's all about is continual improvement. And if you know anything about finance, one of the holy grails in investing is compounding. Now, the same is the case in business. If you have a system that is compounding the benefits over time in the way that Toyota and like all sorts of businesses that believe in Kaizen and continual improvement, then you can get the benefits of a compounding business. And that's one of the things that I see time and time again that's lacking in the clients that I consult with and coach. So number 5, and this is linked to number 4, no unifying system. Again, apologies about the writing. I should have been a doctor. Now, when I refer to a unifying system, I'm thinking about a revenue system. And 4 and 5, I think, are really linked. Because when you have a system, like a revenue engine that the majority of the business feed into and buy into, then you've got the opportunity to layer the compounding benefits on top of one another. And that's what I mean by a unifying system. Let me just say a little bit more about that. When I think about a unifying system, I think about a revenue engine that everyone understands. So everyone in the business understands, not just in the revenue department. So people in product understand it, people in engineering understand it. And because revenue is the heartblood of the heartbeat of every business, I believe that the unifying system that should be in place should be a revenue system. I've got my own special name for it, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. But when you have a revenue system that spurts out information that people take and act on and collects information, both from all the different revenue departments, but from a variety of other departments, you have a system that people can diagnose from whatever's going wrong in that system, that it compounds benefits, and overall it's the engine that drives the business. So those are the 5 factors that I found, or I from my experience believe, are the internal factors that have the biggest impact on revenue growth not happening. So let me give you something that you can use to potentially improve your revenue scenario. I would take this issue of diagnosis, and I would urge you to go to your leadership team or your team in general and ask them one question. What do you think is the number one issue that's stalling or holding back growth? Ask them to write that down, keep it to themselves, and then pass what they've written on to their colleague, and let everyone read what everyone else has said without it being infected by, as soon as you start putting everything on the board, everyone starts changing what they've written or agreeing. And step back, and once you've got those, write up on the board what everyone says. And if your business is realigned, then most people should come up with a similar reason as to what they believe the problems are. And if they don't, then I think, from my experience, staring you in the face is one of the biggest problems you have in the business. Because if you do not have a clear diagnosis as to what you're trying to fix, how can your people be fully engaged in the future? So that's what I would urge you to do. Going forward, I'll be coming up with a variety of different videos that talk about these issues and how to fix them from a revenue system point of view. And if you'd like a more structured way to try to figure out what's holding back your revenue growth right now, I'm going to give you a link underneath this video and ask you to go to revenuejourneymap.com, where there's a very, very simple app that you can ask. It just asks 8 questions, I think it is, and it will help you diagnose where you are with a revenue, how integrated and unified your revenue system is. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, and thank you.